Welcome, 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 and thank you for joining us on another episode of today's Electrical Estimating. I'm your co-host, Chris Trummer, and as always, I'm joined by my other co-host, Sal Huerta.
Hello, everyone.
So, Sal, we are going to be speaking with again Paul, a procurement manager for mid-sized electrical contractor. We'd previously spoken with him about the relationship between estimators and procurement managers. Today, we're going sort of a completely different route with it. We were able to speak to him about his sort of purchasing habits and how e-commerce is tied into what he utilizes to purchase the products he needs for upcoming projects. And this was a great conversation because you and me have talked for years, going back about 7, 8 years now. There was a huge push for e-commerce for distributors. A lot of people were afraid of Amazon coming in, and contractors were going to start utilizing Amazon to purchase their products because product prices may be cheaper, and they were familiar with it. And I don't think that's really come to fruition. And I think this conversation with Paul really highlights the reasons why they never move forwards with purchasing large projects through an e-commerce site.
This is a really good point because, we talk about the estimating side of things, but a lot of times, for medium and smaller companies, the estimator also is the purchasing guy. So they're always asked, how come you don't, from a distributor site, how come you don't use my website to place orders and so forth? And so, this is the number one thing we've been hearing from contractors for, like you said, many, many, many years. And that is, it just doesn't fit the model right now. Meaning that if you're going through your estimate, you're doing all your, you fill in all the content, all the information inside there, and then at the end, it spits out a list of items for you to go buy. Well, that's the point where now you're asking that person who spent hours and hours and hours and days on this estimate to now have to go to a distributor's website and type in all this stuff to get, a pricing for them or so forth. It's just a difficult process. And so I think Paul lays it out really well in this podcast as to what's actually really happening.
And I like the point that he made in the conversation about bringing up, like, if it's not broken, you don't need to fix it. And that, the system that they've been using forever isn't a broken system, but there are ways for technology to adapt to what they have to make their jobs easier, maybe a little bit quicker without reinventing the wheel. That having him, and as you just mentioned, going in with a bill of materials and having to go to multiple websites to add it into different types of e-commerce sites and then have to track that. And it was actually adding work to his schedule. It was putting more time into his days, where, as he goes on to say, if there was a way for people to communicate and say, okay, this is how we do it, this is what works for us, without us having to invest tens of thousands or more dollars, how can we make the communication and the process easier?
I think that you hit the nail on the head with that one, is that there are programs out there that can do these things. But for a medium to smaller size contractor, they're very, very expensive for a process that, like you said, hasn't been broken for them. So if they continue to do the same things that they're doing today, it doesn't cost them that huge investment and training and time and so forth. So yeah, just for them, you can see it just fits doing things the way it works today.
I had a conversation with a distributor a couple of years ago, and we were talking about their e-commerce site, and I blatantly, yeah, like, how's it going? Because, feedback I've gotten from some contractor friends, they never used it. And he was like, to be honest with you, it wasn't what we expected. And they were actually going back to their old site and sort of getting rid of the e-commerce component because they invested all this money, but every year they were having to invest more and more to keep it updated and have the product information correct and add new products, take away products. And he was like, it's just not viable. It's not turning a profit. It's not something that we want to keep investing in because we're not seeing a large enough return.
Yeah, we've talked, like you said, we've talked to distributors, a lot of them in the past concerning the specific question. And again, initially they thought that the e-commerce platform part would be a huge boon for them, that they would be able to work with every contractor and get all the business. Eventually, they came to the realization that, gosh, if it just replaced one branch of all of our branches in his way as far as being successful for them, that was a win for them. And then, like you said, now they've just realized that, it's more like a content site for them, that it's not actually a sales portal for them. I mean, they are getting some sales, but it's just so small that it's not even a part of the process anymore. That you again, you've talked to a number of distributors as well. They're actually canning the whole program that they've actually spent a lot of money into, just because it has not panned out for them.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned their content site. So this site that you've invested all this money and resources to be a sales portal then turns into sort of a oversized resource center that is really only providing, black and white specs and data. It's not a true resource center because it's not providing the insight into the products, why they're going to be labor savings products, or different applications or how to's or installs. So it just becomes sort of like a catalog of sorts for you to search through and get some specs on something and go from there. So sort of feel for the distributors. I feel at the time there was a lot of industry pressure coming from different places without putting names out there that were saying, if you're not gonna do this, you're gonna fail, you're gonna be gobbled up. And I think it was a knee-jerk reaction. What works for B2C doesn't necessarily work B2B when you take a look at things. And especially in this, the distributor brings so much more value added to the industry for contractors that, having a site because Amazon might do it, I think their value add is always outweighed the simplicity of a website. But I think it really was a knee jerk reaction from a lot of outside forces saying, if you're not going to do this, you're going to fail.
I think the number one thing that the industry didn't take into consideration, that is probably the number one aspect of it, is the relationship. These distributors, salespeople, owners of companies, of distribution companies, have a relationship with their local customers. They know them personally. They've seen their business grow. All of these things. And when you put it into an e-commerce platform, all that goes away. And so contractors like working with people that they know, people that they trust. And, that doesn't come through on an e-commerce platform. So that's one of the reasons why these contractors, kind of not fought this, but it just didn't make sense to them, where they say, hey, I know Mike over there, and I just call Mike and he'll tell me what it is, instead of me having to go and type in and punch in all these different numbers. And like you mentioned earlier, it could be 2 or 3 different sites.
Even if I was going to say I was at a job site and I needed 5 or 6 things to finish up, I've worked with friends before and they just pick up the phone. They text somebody that's at the distributor and they're like, "Hey, I need to pick this up in the next, half an hour. I'm going to send somebody over." How much more time would it take them to go onto their website, log into their account, now open up the portal, now go find all the products, add that in there, then put that information in. You know, you're adding time. It's not making the process easier. And I think, as I said before, knee-jerk reactions to things that happen in one space, and people are like, "Oh, we got to do it. It's the new trend. It's a new thing. It works so well for them." Doesn't necessarily translate into another space. I don't know if people had taken the time to speak with their contractors and they were getting feedback from the contractor saying this is going to be amazing. Speaking with Paul, it doesn't seem like anybody reached out to him, because he would have blatantly told him, like,
Yeah.
it just isn't going to work. You're going to make my life more complicated.
I mean, you mentioned in the beginning part of this as well that there are things technology can do to make things better. You're not replacing everything. You're just doing a small portion. And I think that's still out there. I think there are still ways to make this process more efficient, but replacing the whole thing, and it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, even saying, okay, well, you can use it part time. I mean, how much as a distributor are you getting out from a contractor that might use your e-commerce site 4% of the time, 5% of the time? Does it really equate to the investment you're putting into this site constantly, when maybe 1, 2, 3% of sales are coming from it? I mean, I talked to a distributor and he was like, I think 1% of our sales came from our e-commerce site. That means 99% of it came from an outside source.
Mhm.
And now does that 1% equal up to how much you've already invested into it and how much you're putting into it to maintain? It's interesting to me how they got there. But I also think we've talked long enough, and maybe we should give these people the conversation we have from Paul and hear from him and his insights, since it's something he works with on a day-to-day basis. What do you think?
Sounds like a good idea.
All right. Well, great talking to you, Sal, as always, and take care. 8 years ago, 7 years ago, there was a huge push for electrical distributors to get e-commerce. The big bad Amazon business was coming. Every single contractor was going to go online to e-commerce, and they were going to be buying everything, and distributor, they didn't have e-commerce, was going out of business the next day.
Right.
I've talked to a lot of contractors. I got friends that are service and repair contractors. I got friends that own their own, that are doing commercial and residential new construction. I've asked them before, do you use e-commerce? I'm told no. Service and repair guys are picking the phone up and calling when they're on their way in, or they're shooting the guy a text or a quick email. The commercial guys, like, everything's done via email. If I need quick stuff, I'm using the phone. And even distributors I've talked with have said, we haven't seen so much here and there. Do you guys go on when you're purchasing and say, okay, we got to jump on these 3 websites and start buying product from them and that from them? Is it something you've used or do use?
No, and it's funny you mention that, because I remember in a past life, there was a big push. Well, if you go to e-commerce site, I'm like, look, to me, it's a web page. I'm not just buying one widget, right?
Yeah.
I'm buying stuff that needs to be delivered in typical e-commerce site, right? Well, I guess there's different ways you can do it. I mean, we all know the big bad Amazon, which I love it. I get boxes every day. I got 3 kids, so imagine what shows up every day. That's great. But when I need PVC to be there tomorrow, and that happens, I'm not a big fan of having my superintendents or anybody on the field driving in. I want that stuff delivered. And most my guys in the field are not going to sit there and shop online, mind you, right? They're not going to sit there, I need this. They're going to send me a list saying, hey, I need this in the next week. I wish, but they're going to need it next week. Can you help me out? Yeah, let's get this source. Let's get it out there and get it back to you. Let's get delivered on their truck. I'll be reaching out to my counterpart on the sales side. Hey, I got a bid here. Can you do it or can't you? Can you hold it for 60, 90 days? There's a lot of stuff that you can do online, but it's just not there yet. You could say I'm a personable guy. I like talking to my suppliers and seeing what can you do. It's a partnership, and I need those guys to be on my side as well. So e-commerce is still being pushed. It's just not there yet. It's not.
Yeah. So it seems like they're not there in a few aspects. Not only maybe the technology side is getting there, they're trying their best to get a lot of the features in there, but not exactly what people are looking for. But it sounds like too the relationship side, and that's a lot of things I've heard from people in the past is with their distributors that they have a relationship. They can pick up the phone and talk to somebody. They can negotiate them or be like, hey, I need something from this or that. You have the relationship with the person there that transcends a computer and a click where you lose all of that.
Yeah, no, it does. And hey, the salesman will sit there and throw it in the back of his car or throw it in the back of his truck and drive it 40 minutes on the other side of town just to make that happen. I'm not going to get that from an e-commerce site. No. I'm not going to get, oh yeah, it'll ship. Oh yeah, you can ship. You got this great shipping. Okay, yeah, it'll be there next Thursday. I got an inspection tomorrow. That's not going to work. And it shouldn't be like that, but everybody's running around with their head cut off. There's some great project managers that will lay down their job way ahead of time, but there's also, part of my language, the SOL moments, right? Where you need something tomorrow.
Yeah, they come up.
Right.
Something's always going to come up. It doesn't matter how much you plan it out to the perfect, period at the end of this long plan. Something's always going to come up that you need.
And let's face it, if I put a bill of material together, by the time I would click every site to see what the prices were, it'll take me forever. I mean, I guess we're going to get to a time when I can have a bill of material that okay, here's a bill of material. It gets sent out automatically, right? Gets to my 3 suppliers with a click of a button. But for the e-commerce to grow, it's got to be on both sides. It's not only got to be pushed from the suppliers, which they are, distribution, I should say, but it's also got to be pushed from our side. And I'm not sure if our side is ready for that yet, or want to invest in anything like that. Is it broken now? Well, no, but it could be better. Well, what do you mean it could be better? Well, I can get quote. Well, you're doing that now. Why would I want to spend money on an application to do that?
It needs to be something there that is a benefit to you guys as well.
Yeah.
Like that makes your life easier, that makes your life faster, that gives you the information you need.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like with this, you're in multiple sites, putting in hundreds of product.
Yeah.
You're adding more time the way that it's set up right now than what you're doing currently.
Right. Just for me to take my bill of material and blast it out to my network and get prices back. There are some really good sourcing applications out there. Some of them are to the point that, and I'm not just talking about in construction, there's some to the point where it's the whole procurement lifestyle, from the actual purchasing to the contract, to the inventory, to the payment, a whole P2P system. Those cost a lot of money. You know what I mean? And it's a very big investment. And I'm not saying we can't do it, but let's say our company is growing ridiculously. How do you stop and say, oh, we're going to do it this way? You get 500 people to stop at a time.
Let's start from the beginning, all convergent and money in this time. And hey, and then we're going to have to switch from one program to another program and make sure everything's getting. Yeah, I've been there before, just switching over programs for warehouse and purchasing department. And it was the biggest cluster I've dealt with, because you're trying to take products from one system to put products into another system while Jimmy's taking stuff off the back and putting it in his van, and your counts are completely off for the next 2 years because nobody can get it straight. And
you can Google, there's some really cool, I'm not going to do a plug for them, whatever they could do, but there's some really cool applications out there. If you look for electrical construction, for construction, P2P platforms, there's plenty out there, but it's got to be an enterprise-wide decision that we're going to live with this heartburn for the next 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah.
And then once we come out of it, we'll be a better company. It's a hard pitch to sell.
Yeah. Right time. It seems like it's a lot of right time, right place, right time, right cost, kind of all coming together at the perfect. But until then, it seems like you guys are good. It's not something you need to do, but it's something that if all of these factors come together, then it, hey, let's take a look and move forwards with. But you're not dying because you're not having it.
Correct. And then on the low voltage side, I know we're talking electrical contracting. There is a company that said, you give me quantities and part numbers, and you could just put that up to the cloud, and I'll give you a quote. I'm like, okay, but is this quote any good? Because no offense to the guy, that's great, but I can call. I'll just pick out a name, Johnny, and say, hey, I need a better price. Can you help me out here? Yeah, here you go. Who am I calling on that side, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask. Procurement side, I'm going to ask for a better price. I mean, you give me a great price in the beginning, I still ask for a better price. All right.
Well, let me ask. I guess we've talked about the e-commerce part. Some of these other applications or programs and what you guys are doing. Have you ever, or will you ever use Amazon? I know you sort of answered that, but I have to ask. Directly.
What's funny is, so I'm always being judged by the prices that I can find online.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were to go to a regular retail shop, right, more or less, right? If you take a look at some of the big box stores, which have some of the biggest buying power in the United States, why can't you get that price? I've been shopped that way before. Well, it's been the back of my head, and part of my mind's like, I would shop there, no big deal. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, how's this look for the company branding if I showed up in a Home Depot and here I'm a multi-million-dollar operation showing up at, pardon the language here, a truck slammer. You know what I mean? A trunk slammer. So it's like, well, no, I wouldn't say no to it. Will that help breed competition? Yeah. But then you're taking out the whole personal aspect of that, leveraging the partnership. If I was in a pinch and I need a unique thing, I could see myself going online. If I have to buy out a whole first floor of a retail shop or something like that, I'm not doing that.
Do you feel too, like you sort of alluded to it, but with one of these, I always looked at some of these big box places as being more of a competitor to, say, a distributor than would be Amazon.
Yeah.
And I got, as I said, buddies who do the service and repair. There's either a single man show or a couple man, and it works for them because, it works. But do you think you lose some of that relationship as well? Because a lot of this that I feel like we've talked about through a lot of this conversation has been relationships are key.
Yeah.
And do you think you lose that relationship because now you're dealing with whoever is working that day at the place, or if they leave somebody else, you don't have that set. It seems like, it's difficult to even find the word, but the people in that relationship that from the distributor that, you have right now.
You lose that trust, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now they feel like they're being shopped by a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, and you now when you need them for a favor, and I wouldn't that relationship they would do it. Now it's like, well, hey, you got your big box store retailer, why don't you go pick it up from them? Oh, but they don't carry 755 conductor.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So that could be, that could be the issue. I agree. It's probably there's a spot for them. The big box stores, and definitely in this construction world. On the distribution side, the bigger you get, I don't see that being a good leverage. And I could be wrong. You know what I mean? There's a lot of great programs out there, from buying online to pick up outside the store where less good. But at the end of the day, who am I going to call? The owner of the Atlanta Falcons? I need a delivery tomorrow? No.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have that.
Yeah, I don't have that. I forget his name, but
yeah, he's going to be out on his yacht that he has.
Yeah,
where you can call up and the guys that are down the street, they know you have that. So it seems like that's, as I was just saying, relationships. I mean, you've been saying that from the get-go.
Yeah,
it's really about having that personal relationship with your suppliers, your distributors, and it seems like that sort of trumps what we're talking about here, going in those avenues when it even might come to a little bit of cost, just because you have that reliance, that relationship that's going to be building.
That's the way I approach it. I take a lot of pride in my name and knowing that if something's wrong, you can call me and I'll do my best to work it out. And sometimes I might be out of my hands, and
it is what it is.
Yeah, those stuff happen. Do trust my network. They've made me look good. Yeah. Which at the end of the day, I want them to look good, because the better
it's a valuable currency of having those relationships with people, knowing that you can call them, they can call you. You got that relationship available.